From 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14, and the version that I am reading from this morning is the Message. Naaman was general of the army under the king of Aram. He was important to his master, who held him in the highest esteem, because it was by him that God had given victory to Aram, a truly great man, but afflicted with a grievous skin condition. It so happened that Aram, on one of its raiding expeditions against Israel, captured a young girl who became a maid to Naaman's wife. One day she said to her mistress, "Oh, if only my master could meet the prophet of Samaria, he would be healed of his skin disease." Naaman went straight to his master and reported what the girl from Israel had said. "Well, then go," said the king of Aram, "and I'll send a letter of introduction to the king of Israel." So he went off, taking with him about 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothes. Naaman delivered the letter to the king of Israel. And the letter read, "When you get this letter, you'll know that I've personally sent my servant Naaman to you. Heal him of the skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he was terribly upset, ripping his robe to pieces. He said, "Am I a God with the power to bring death or life, that I get orders to heal this man from his disease? What's going on here? That king's trying to pick a fight, that's what." Elijah, the man of God, heard what had happened, that the king of Israel was so distressed that he ripped his robe to shreds. And he sent word to the king, "Why are you so upset, ripping your robe like this? Send him to me so he'll learn that there's a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and arrived in style and stopped at Elisha's door. He sent out a servant to meet him with this message: "Go to the river Jordan and immerse yourself 7 times. Your skin will be healed, and you will be good as new." Naaman lost his temper. He turned on his heel, saying, "I thought he'd personally come out and meet me, call on the name of God, wave his hand over the diseased spot, and get rid of the disease. The Damascus rivers, Abana and Pharpar, are cleaner by far than any of the rivers in Israel. Why not bathe in them, and at least get clean?" He stomped off, mad as a hornet. But his servants caught up with him and said, "Father, if the prophet had asked you to do something hard and heroic, wouldn't you have done it? So why not this simple wash and be clean?" So he did it. He went down and immersed himself in the Jordan 7 times, following the orders of the holy man. His skin was healed, and it was like the skin of a baby, and he was as good as new. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
So my sabbatical earlier this year was full of experiences that left me overflowing with joy. There was one notable exception, however, and that was when my friend Chris, pastor of 6th Avenue UCC, and I went on a mini civil rights tour to Birmingham, Selma, and Montgomery, Alabama. Our first stop was at the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 little girls were murdered by white supremacists who threw a bomb at the church on Youth Sunday. And we remember their names: Denise, Carol, Addie, and Cynthia. Across the street, there were memorials to the 4,000 nameless school children who braved the police dogs and fire hoses and included a statue of children behind jail bars. And in Selma, we walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But the real reason for the trip was to visit the new National Memorial for Justice and Peace in Montgomery, which is otherwise known as the Lynching Memorial. It's a monument of stunning proportions, including 800 coffin-shaped steel boxes hanging from above, engraved with the names of more than 4,000 documented victims, men, women, and children, including 14-year-old Emmett Till in Mississippi, who was lynched because he was accused of flirting with a white woman. And among the list of names, there's a disturbing number of 14, 15, and 16-year-olds like Ernest and Charlie and Jesse and Willie James, and an 18-year-old pregnant Mary Turner. So accompanying this lynching memorial is the Legacy Museum, which shows the uninterrupted, ever-adaptable strategies of white supremacists to dehumanize, from methods that morphed from slavery to lynching to Jim Crow laws to the prison, the preschool to prison pipeline of mass incarceration. The museum is brutal, but one of the most particularly brutal exhibits is a hologram of a woman crying out for her children who had been ripped from her arms and sold on the auction block. So naturally, children are on our minds this weekend of celebrations of freedom and independence, all while migrant children are being locked in cages, now debating the necessity of soap, ripped from their parents' arms as they flee violence and seek asylum. And I thought, didn't I just preach about this? And I looked back, and a year ago, my sermon was entitled, Children Ripped and Scattered. And in it I read from a poem, Home, by Warsan Shire, a British Somali poet. And this is a short excerpt. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or prison. I want to go home. But home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore. And those lines are so poignant, painfully poignant, as we recall images of the father and daughter who drowned in the Rio Grande 2 weeks ago. Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez and Angie Valeria. A year ago, we were shocked that the intentional cruelty of this administration could descend to such an unimagined level as to lock kids in cages as a strategy. Does this shock us at all anymore? Just more business as usual? For the administration, which was forced to admit there was no register created to reunite families with their children, despite reassurances, and then a year later, there are still 300 left to be reunited. And there are fears that some may be adopted without permission of their parents, fears not unfounded. Families who agree to foster migrant children are told explicitly they may not adopt those children, and yet that didn't stop one family in Michigan from suing to do exactly that, claiming they feared for the girls' safety. And they probably read the glowing reviews from Bethany Christian Services about the joy of fostering a migrant child like Juanita. So when Juanita and her older brother were apprehended by immigration, they were separated, and Juanita was placed in detention with other minors. Her brother was sent back to Guatemala. Juanita was sent to a family in Michigan. She didn't want to go, but the testimonial claims that over time, Juanita realized how much her foster parents cared for her, and she slowly began to trust them, and eventually that trust turned into love. And now she said, when I think of family, the first thing that comes to mind is my foster family. And today, Juanita is completing a college degree in social work to help others navigate their own difficult journeys. And I think, oh, what a lovely, absolutely lovely sentiment, an uplifting outcome. And I'm grateful for families who are willing to offer such a loving home, and horrified at how absolutely normal such testimonials portray the role of organizations like Bethany Christian Services, the Betsy DeVos-funded agency that's well-connected and extremely well compensated for their work. It may seem necessary and justified, but won't we one day realize it's just as complicit as all the Christian denominations that facilitated the efforts of the federal government to kill the Indian and save the man during the boarding school era? Another example of black and brown children ripped from their families, including plenty of success stories about children who were educated in those nightmare schools to become doctors and other professionals, overlooking the generational trauma of forced family separation. So today's story is one of those success stories too, although the Juanita-esque aspect of it can easily be overlooked. There's a detail we often miss when we tell the story of Naaman. But my friend Katie Hawker from seminary, she doesn't miss these kind of details. First, just a sort of a recap of the story. So Naaman was this exalted army commander who had successfully led his soldiers to win difficult strategic battles, but this valiant soldier had a skin disease, and sometimes it's translated leprosy, but this probably wasn't that. As the story goes, during one of his successful campaigns against Israel, he brought back a young girl to be his wife's servant. That girl suggested to Naaman's wife that he should go to see the prophet back in Samaria, in the territory of Israel, to be healed. And Naaman asked the permission of his king, who agreed to send a letter to the king of Israel. And when the king of Israel received the letter, thought it must be a trick. I'm not God. I can't heal someone. So, naturally suspicious of the enemy, the king pondered, what does he really want? Elisha told the king to send them on over. So Naaman, with all his horses and chariots full of jewels and gold and gifts, stopped in front of Elisha's house. And as we heard, Elisha sent a servant out to tell Naaman to simply go wash in the river Jordan 7 times, and he would be as clean as snow. But the valiant and exalted army commander was furious, insulted that a mere servant spoke to him, not Elisha directly, and that he would tell him something so ridiculous. I mean, for one thing, someone of his stature was certainly capable of a more demanding regime than dunking himself in a river 7 times. But for the other thing, the Jordan was a mud pit, and the rivers back in Syria ran fresh and pure and clean, fed by the melting snow of the mountains, and as the text said, at least there he'd get clean. So he's doubly insulted and underwhelmed. And in a rage, turned to go back home, but one of his servants carefully approached him and suggested that if Elisha had suggested something difficult, that he would have done it, so why not if so simple? Naaman, the great warrior, humbled himself and went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as he was told, and his flesh was restored. Now, isn't that a great story with a happy ending? And there are such great themes like humility and trust, and what happens when you swallow your pride and ask for a little help. Frankly, it's a good story for fiercely self-sufficient people who complain, I can do it myself, thank you very much. It's a story about 2 enemies who cooperate. It's a story of ask and you shall receive, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door shall be opened unto you. It's a story for anyone who has refused a simple instruction, such as, I want peace in my soul. Just don't ask me to forgive my neighbor. So it's a great story because Naaman, though reluctant, listened. And it's an even better story because it all started with a little girl suggesting it. She, with no name and no power, proclaimed faith in the God of Israel and demonstrated God's great power, and that it was available to everyone, not just those in Israel. But that little detail, that girl, she was war booty, captive. She was kidnapped from her home and made to be a slave. Spoils of war. Now, with news stories for the past year about children in cages, how could we miss the detail that this girl was ripped from her family too? And perhaps it's because we can too easily turn her into a Juanita success story. That thanks to the great faith of this little girl, everything is okay because the soldier was healed and made whole again. But what about her? I mean, was she set free? Was she allowed to go back home? All this success without naming the girl's pain and trauma from being separated. Katie notes this is a familiar pattern when those in power celebrate the faith of the little ones on whose neck they stand. Accolades from the mighty for the faith of those they disempower. All of this is terrible and true. And so, then what? What do we do with all this? So I don't envy those who have to figure out how to handle the humanitarian crisis coming to our border. But I can't help but notice the familiar response to black and brown children is to remove them from their parents. And for how often religious people like James Dobson call these children things like illiterate and unhealthy and declare them a threat to, quote, our culture. Read that again. James Dobson calls these children a threat to our culture. Another white supremacist ever-adapting strategy to dehumanize black and brown people that must be dismantled. So, there's one part of this story that's almost always left out when it's told, and even the lectionary leaves this last part out. So, after Naaman's skin is made whole, he returned home. He had been prepared, he had come prepared to pay for his cure. He had brought loads of silver and gold and clothing, and Elisha refused payment. Because grace and healing are not commodities. They're gifts, they're free. So Elijah's protege, Gehazi, saw an opportunity for a little profit for himself. So he chased after Naaman and told him that Elisha had changed his mind and wanted payment after all. And Naaman was more than happy to oblige and even doubled the amount Gehazi had requested. When Gehazi got back home, Elisha asked where he'd been. Like a teenager, he said nowhere. And what have you been doing? Nothing. But Elisha knew exactly what Gehazi had been doing. And so, for using the situation of free grace and healing to make a profit, Gehazi was stricken with Naaman's skin disease, which Elisha proclaimed will now cling to you and to your descendants forever. And immediately, Gehazi's skin became as flaky as snow. So I don't know which makes this ending, happier. Whether it's the faith of that nameless little girl so Naaman's skin could be restored, or the divine justice for those like Gehazi who seek to profit off the misery of others. like politicians on both sides of the aisles, like companies such as the Geo Group, Core Civic, who earned $985 million from ICE contracts in 2017 alone. Or Southwest Key, which in the past few years has amassed almost $1 billion in contracts. Just one in the lucrative, secretive world of migrant shelters. So 547 Wayfair employees said they had enough. Approached their employer, who refused to do anything. So they walked off the job. And they wrote, "We believe that by selling products to contractors who enable the violation of children's rights are complicit in furthering the inhumane actions of our government." Now, Bethany Christian Services, which collects $700 per night per child, doesn't seem similarly concerned. And they don't seem concerned about causing skin disease either, from profiting off misery. So we come down to the end of this, and you ask, so what can I do? Well, there's a few things. Are you certain, if you have stock, that you don't have stock in a company like the Geo Group and profit off the misery of children? Do you have social responsibility screens on your investments? Ask. You can do that. We're going on a 1-week border immersion experience in September. You can join us in that and walk migrant trails and see the border itself. And several of our UCC churches in Metro Denver, including ours, are collaborating literally right now to create a sanctuary space for families facing deportation in the building of one of our churches that recently closed. And it will need funding and volunteers. And those are a couple of things. You can Google more. In the end, it's just true. Forced separation is wrong. It's immoral. It's unethical. And it should be understood by all to be unchristian. But if they must be in our care temporarily, are the children well cared for? Do they have enough to eat? Do they have soap? A toothbrush? Is someone lifting them when they cry? Is someone wiping away their tears? Are the children well? And is someone holding accountable the adults charged with their care for these crimes against humanity? Oh Lord, we pray for your divine justice for those who profit off the misery of children. And pray for the children and their families. Join me. God of mothers and fathers, God of babies and children, youth and teens, the voice of agony echoes across the land as children are taken from their parents, perverting our values, perverting the ways of justice and peace and human decency, so that a few may reap the rewards, the political rewards of their suffering by playing tough at the border. Source of grace, creator of kindness and goodness, you call upon us to stand in the name of justice and fairness, to witness against this abuse of power, to battle the systemic assault on human beings, and to speak against their suffering. Bless all who rise up against this horror. Bless those who plead on behalf of the oppressed before the seats of power. Bless these children who wait in misery to be reunited with their families. Bless those in bondage at the hand of our government. Grant comfort and consolation, and release them, free them, heal them from trauma, reunite them with their families, and hasten the day of their reunion. Blessed are you, God of all being, who summon us all to oppose violence, injustice,